was supposed to be just another school afternoon. The bus returned to the station on time, every child accounted for except one. Lucy Brennan had vanished without a trace, despite boarding the bus like she always did. No witnesses, no evidence, just an empty seat and a mother's growing dread. What began as a quiet panic soon unraveled into a chilling mystery that would haunt a town for nearly a decade. The late afternoon sun draped a golden hue over the suburban streets of Maple Crest, a quiet American town where school days ended with the familiar rumble of yellow buses pulling into driveways and the chorus of parents greeting their kids. It was a routine. Predictable, safe. That Thursday was supposed to be like any other. Ms. Harmon, a third-grade teacher known for her warm smile and laminated checklists, stood at the back of Bus 17 as it pulled into the school's loading zone. She was one of the few teachers who stayed every afternoon to help the students board safely and wave goodbye from the curb. At 3:15 p.m. sharp, she had completed her final head count. 24 students, she had said to the driver, all present. She watched as the last ones climbed into their seats, backpacks bouncing against their small frames. Among them was Lucy Brennan, a quiet, curious girl with a pink jacket and strawberry blonde hair tied into 2 uneven braids. Lucy had been unusually excited that morning. It was Thursday, and Thursday meant art class. She had clutched a folded drawing with stars and galaxies scrawled in crayon and told Ms. Harmon it was for her mom. "She says my dreams are too big," Lucy had whispered. "But I think the stars listen." Ms. Harmon had smiled. "Then draw them louder." That was the last real conversation anyone had with Lucy. The bus left the school at 3:20 p.m., heading along its usual route through the quiet neighborhoods of Maple Crest. At each stop, children hopped off, their feet hitting the pavement in excited thuds. By 3:48 p.m., the bus pulled into the District Transportation Center, its final stop. All the students should have exited. But when the driver, Mr. Hill, a stoic man in his 50s, performed his standard sweep of the vehicle, his heart sank. The back seat, usually occupied by Lucy, was empty. Thinking she might have fallen asleep or crouched beneath a seat to retrieve something, he checked every row. Nothing. No pink jacket, no crayon drawing, no Lucy. Panic tightened his chest. He called Ms. Harmon immediately, expecting perhaps she had taken Lucy off the bus for some reason. "What do you mean she's not there?" Her voice trembled. "I watched her get on." Within the hour, the school principal had alerted the local police, and Lucy's mother, Claire Brennan, was summoned from work. Claire worked at the local library and had been shelving returned books when she got the call. She dropped everything. "She was there this morning," Claire kept repeating to herself on the drive. She had her stars. She arrived at the school barely able to breathe, demanding answers that no one had. The footage from the school's front gate was pulled immediately. There she was, Lucy, stepping onto the bus at exactly 3:17 p.m., clear as day, pink jacket, braves, drawing in hand. But when detectives reviewed the onboard bus camera footage and surveillance at the various drop-off points, Lucy was never seen getting off. Not at her designated stop, not at any stop. It was as if she had simply vanished in the space between point A and point B. No screaming, no commotion, no witness. And yet, no Lucy. That night, helicopters hovered above the wooded outskirts of town, volunteers walked the bus route with flashlights, and dogs traced her scent as far as the third stop. Then it disappeared, faded like smoke. Claire sat in the school hallway, clutching the drawing her daughter had given her the week before, a crayon sketch of stars and moons and a note at the bottom, "For Mommy, in case I fly away someday." Police questioned every student on the bus, every neighbor, every passing car caught on traffic cameras. Nothing. Mr. Hill, the driver, was put on leave, pending investigation. He insisted he'd done nothing wrong. "She wasn't there at the end. I swear I checked." Miss Harmon broke down during an interview with the detectives. "I saw her get on. She said the stars were listening." Even the other students, young as they were, remembered Lucy that morning. One child recalled her saying, "Something big is happening today." As days turned into weeks, the frenzy faded. Leads dried up, no ransom, no sightings, no body, just absence. A kind of silence that settled into Maple Crest like fog. Claire refused to move on. She kept Lucy's room untouched, Her pink jacket still hung behind the door, her favorite mug still on the kitchen shelf. She stopped working, spent days watching bus footage, reading case files, joining online forums of missing children, but mostly she stared at the stars, and every evening at 3:48 p.m. she would go to the transportation center and sit at the exact spot where bus 17 stopped, waiting, listening, because Lucy had said the stars were listening, and maybe, just maybe, one day they would answer. 3 months had passed since Lucy Brennan vanished, and with each sunrise over Maple Crest, the town's sense of urgency decayed, like the withering posters fading in rain along fences and shop windows. At first, everyone had rallied. Neighbors, teachers, local news channels, even strangers from neighboring towns came with search dogs, drones, and hot meals for the family. But when no answers came, the enthusiasm turned into whispers, and the whispers curdled into suspicion. By December, the frost came early, icing over the leaves and freezing the hopes that Lucy would ever be found. The police, after reviewing every known camera angle, re-interviewing students, and analyzing the bus interior for fibers, blood, fingerprints, anything, finally released their public statement. All evidence suggests this is an abduction. However, with no physical clues, no eyewitnesses, and no demands, the case is currently cold. Claire watched the announcement alone from her living room, her coffee untouched, her eyes hollow. Daniel, Lucy's father, was not there. He had left for his brother's cabin in the hills 2 weeks earlier, saying he needed air, space, clarity, something he could not find in a house filled with static grief. But Maple Crest had always been a small town with long memories and short tolerance, and while Claire continued to post daily updates on Lucy's Facebook page, while she joined every missing person advocacy group she could find, the town had started talking. Some said Lucy had run away, though no child that young could have planned something so perfect. Others suggested something darker. The Brennan house, once the cozy blue bungalow with a tire swing in the yard, had become a ghost on the block, its blinds always drawn, the paint peeling unnoticed, and Claire's figure barely visible behind the living room curtain. But the worst came not from strangers, but from those they once called friends. At the grocery store, Claire overheard Mrs. Talbot whispering in the cereal aisle, "I always found Daniel a little off. Don't you think it's strange? No ransom, no car spotted? And that he was so quiet at the vigil?" Another voice responded, "Hushed, exactly. And he left town right after. What kind of father just leaves?" Claire didn't say anything. She just left the cart and walked out into the cold. She no longer attended church. Her book club had stopped sending invites. Even Lucy's former classmates were pulled away quietly by wary parents who didn't want their children too involved. Some claimed to protect their kids. Others just didn't want to be near the tragedy, or what they suspected was behind it. The detectives, too, began circling back, not with hope, but with routine. One came by every few weeks, asking the same questions but with subtle shifts in tone. "Has Daniel contacted you recently? When exactly did he leave for the cabin? Has he mentioned regrets?" Claire knew the implication. It had started in late November when a journalist from a true crime podcast emailed her asking for an interview, claiming an anonymous source had mentioned a strange detail, that Lucy's last drawing, supposedly kept by Claire, had actually been found in the glove compartment of Daniel's truck during an early search. Claire had been told nothing of this. But the idea took hold, rooted itself in the town's collective unease. Rumors fermented quickly that Daniel had a temper, that he drank more than he should, that he had once slapped Lucy in public at the park. None of it had been true, or if there was truth, it was twisted beyond recognition. Daniel was not perfect, but he loved his daughter. Claire knew that, didn't she? By Christmas, snow covered the roads in thick silence. Claire set up the tree alone, hanging Lucy's favorite ornaments, little planets made of glittery foam, and placing her daughter's tiny astronaut figurine at the top instead of a star. She kept waiting for Daniel to come back. He hadn't called, not once. No texts, no emails. Claire's brother, a defense attorney from Chicago, offered to step in if things escalated. She refused. She wasn't going to lawyer up like she had something to hide. She just wanted her daughter back. But silence answers with more silence. And then, one morning in January, Claire found a box on her porch. There was no return address. Inside were dozens of Lucy's school papers, her library card, even an old stuffed rabbit she used to sleep with. But these weren't things missing from the house. These had been returned, reorganized, as if collected by someone outside the family. The handwriting on the label was neat, blocky, unfamiliar, and it had no note. She brought it to the police, her hands shaking, but they offered no reassurance. "Could be a hoax," the detective said. "Could be someone playing sick games." Or, he added, not looking at her, "it could be something else." Claire knew what he meant. "You think he's trying to tell me something?" she asked, her voice very about him. He just nodded toward the bagged evidence and said, "We'll let you know what we find." That night, Claire sat at the kitchen table, the rabbit in her lap, its ears frayed from years of love. She turned it over and over, wondering if it had been planted, if Lucy had really touched it recently, if this was a goodbye or a beginning. Outside, snowflakes continued to fall, soft and slow. Maplecrest was silent again, but this time Claire felt a shift. Something had changed, and deep inside, she knew the silence was about to be broken. 2 weeks after the mysterious box arrived on Claire's doorstep, local authorities quietly shelved the case once more. The items inside the box yielded no usable DNA, no fingerprints, nothing to definitively trace them back to any known person. Claire, however, refused to let go. She found herself returning again and again to a detail so small that the police hadn't bothered to include it in their official report. The folded corner of Lucy's library card, which had been precisely torn in the same spot Claire remembered Lucy fussing over just weeks before her disappearances. It was personal, intimate, and could not have been faked, but no one seemed to care. The media had long moved on. The neighborhood grew quiet again, and Daniel remained unreachable. During a parent-teacher night at the school that spring, Claire, now volunteering at the school library just to stay close to the last place Lucy had felt safe, overheard a conversation between 2 fourth graders. One of them, a boy named Micah Palmer, claimed he had seen something weird on the day Lucy went missing. Claire approached gently, offering them cookies and asking with a soft voice if they could tell her more. Micah hesitated, eyeing the adults nearby before lowering his voice. "It was by the woods," he whispered. "She didn't go home like the rest of us. She walked toward the trees, near where the old tool shed used to be. I saw her. I swear I did." Claire froze. "Did you tell anyone?" she asked. The boy nodded slowly. "Mr. Hill, but he said I was imagining it." When she brought this detail to the police, they dismissed it again. The report from 5 years ago listed the statement as uncorrelated and inconsistent, attributed to a child's confusion under stress. Kids imagine things, especially when something big happens, the detective shrugged. But Claire couldn't let it go. That night, she visited the edge of the school grounds, where the sidewalk gave way to a thicket of old maples and pine. It was a quiet place, often overlooked. She wandered deeper, the branches brushing her coat, the sound of rustling leaves oddly comforting. She stood near the mossy concrete slab where the tool shed once stood before it was torn down. The ground was undisturbed. No markers, no footprints, just silence. Still, she felt something had happened there, something the others didn't want to see. 5 years passed in slow fragments. Claire aged in invisible ways. The town grew, new families moved in, and Lucy's name became a quiet ghost that lived only in the minds of a few. By now, the Brennan case had become a kind of whispered legend, tragic, unsolved, politely unspoken. The old elementary school underwent renovations. Highways were repainted, new security systems installed, and the aging mural in the East Wing, once a colorful depiction of Maplecrest's 4 seasons, was scheduled for removal. Claire, still volunteering at the library, helped sort art supplies in a nearby storage room when she overheard 2 maintenance workers pulling down the last panel of the mural. A low, startled voice called out, "Hey, come look at this." Behind the mural, on the original concrete wall, someone had drawn with what looked like a child's crayon, a crude, faded sketch of a girl with braided hair, a pink jacket, and wide, staring eyes. Above her was a green rectangle like a door, with uneven letters scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Help me in the green door." The words sent a current through Claire's sketch. She rushed forward, shoving aside the workers, hands trembling as she traced the lines of the drawing. It was unmistakably Lucy. Not as she was 5 years ago, but older, taller, the hair was longer, the features slightly matured. This had been drawn after her disappearance. The police were called immediately. Forensics teams analyzed the crayon, scraped samples of paint layers to determine the drawing's age, and consulted handwriting specialists. The results were baffling. Based on the deterioration of the pigments and the chemical aging of the wall behind the mural, the drawing had been made no more than a year ago, meaning Lucy, or someone who knew her intimately, had access to the school recently. Even more disturbing, there were no signs of forced entry, no records of unauthorized access. The school had been locked every night, monitored with motion detectors. No alerts had ever been triggered. Claire became obsessed with the phrase, "green door." She scoured school blueprints, town records, old architectural maps, anything that could point to a green-painted structure near the school, but nothing matched. She began researching older parts of town, abandoned buildings, forgotten bunkers, Civil War as storm shelters. The phrase haunted her. At night she dreamed of green doors in fields, in basements, in deep, echoing corridors where Lucy's voice called faintly through the cracks. Meanwhile, others started to notice her obsession. One teacher at the school, Mr. Arlen, privately warned Claire to be careful. "Some things around here," he said cautiously, "aren't as forgotten as they seem." She pressed him, but he refused to say more. That same week, someone broke into Claire's home. They didn't steal anything, but they removed the library card, the stuffed rabbit, and the crayon drawing she had carefully preserved. There were no fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. Just silence again. The next morning, Claire found a sticky note on her fridge. It simply read, "Stop. Some doors should stay closed." Claire Brennan knew fear intimately, but after the break-in and the green door drawing, that fear alchemized into resolve. The message on her fridge had the opposite effect of what was intended. If someone wanted her to stop, it meant she was close, closer than she'd ever been. For years, she had begged authorities to reopen the case, to consider every lead, but this time she didn't wait for permission. She dusted off her notebooks, reopened every file, every article, every email thread. Night after night, she sat at her dining table, lit only by the yellow glow of a desk lamp and surrounded by a sea of papers and post-its, red circles and question marks forming a web of obsession. Her first target was every adult who had regular contact with Lucy in the days before her disappearance. Teachers, coaches, bus drivers. She combed through employment histories, old forums, public records, anything she could find. And then one name rose like oil in water: Miss Harmon. The same Ms. Harmon who had helped Lucy board the bus that afternoon. The same Ms. Harmon who had cried during police interviews, insisting she had double-checked the roll call. Claire had always believed her, had even leaned on her in those early days, but now something felt wrong. Claire searched deeper, digging through newspaper archives from other towns and school districts. After days of slogging through databases and encrypted teacher forums, she uncovered a decades-old report from a town 3 hours south, Fairfield, population barely 2,000. In 1999, a student named Lila Morris, age 9, went missing after school. Her teacher at the time, Mary Harmon, the name alone made Claire's blood freeze. The report noted that Ms. Harmon was placed on administrative leave during the investigation, but was never charged. The case, much like Lucy's, had gone cold. She drove to Fairfield the next morning, her heart hammering with every mile. At the tiny county library, she requested the original case file and found it buried in a dusty metal drawer. The circumstances mirrored Lucy's case disturbingly well. A quiet girl, vanished after school hours, last seen by Ms. Harmon near the edge of school property. No ransom, no leads, no body. When she returned, she began watching Ms. Harmon. She wasn't hard to find. The teacher still lived alone in a modest apartment complex on the edge of town and taught a reduced schedule at the school. Claire followed her several times, taking care to stay far enough not to be noticed. Harmon's life seemed uneventful, even dull. Grocery runs, church on Sunday, morning walks. But one Saturday afternoon, Claire followed her out of town, past the main road into a stretch of rural highway flanked by overgrown trees and abandoned farms. Harmon's car turned down an unmarked dirt road, barely visible from the main road, and disappeared behind a thicket of brush. Claire waited 15 minutes before following on foot, hiding her car behind a gas station. The road led to an old, sagging house with boarded windows and a collapsed porch. A rusty mailbox leaned sideways, covered in moss. No address, no signs of life. Harmon's car was parked in the weeds, half covered by leaves. Claire crouched behind a tree and waited. After 20 minutes, Harmon exited the house, locked the door, and drove away. Claire approached cautiously, heart pounding. The front door was bolted from the inside, but a side window had a broken frame. She slid it open carefully and climbed through. The inside smelled of dust and rotted wood. Faded wallpaper peeled from the walls, and every step on the old floorboards echoed like a drumbeat. It didn't feel lived in, more like a place someone visited regularly but never called home. Furniture was sparse. A single chair in the living room, an old cabinet with broken hinges, a table with scratches that looked like claw marks. But it was the hallway at the back that drew her attention. There, past a faded bathroom and a doorless bedroom, stood a single, solid green door. Claire's breath caught. It was almost exactly like the one Lucy had drawn, rectangular, thick, chipped at the corners, but unmistakably green. It looked out of place in the otherwise drab house, as if it had been transplanted from somewhere else entirely. A large padlock hung from the latch. Claire tried the handle, locked, of course. She backed up, searching for anything that could help. In a dusty kitchen drawer, she found a screwdriver and a rusted wrench. She returned to the green door and began to work on the lock, her hands trembling. Sweat beaded at her temples. After minutes of silent struggle, the lock gave with a crack. She hesitated, then opened it. The smell hit her first. Stale air, mildew, something faintly metallic. Inside was a narrow room, maybe 10 feet long, lined with thick insulation foam and covered in soundproof padding. There were no windows, just a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Along the walls were children's drawings, taped carefully, almost lovingly, stars, animals, scenes from stories. Claire's eyes scanned them until she found one that stopped her heart, a crayon sketch of a girl with red shoes holding a stuffed rabbit. At the bottom, the name Lucy was printed in jagged, shaky handwriting. On the opposite wall was a corkboard covered in clipped photographs, school portraits of various children, most unfamiliar. But one stood out, a school photo of Lila Morris from Fairfield, dated 1999. Claire felt her knees buckle. She steadied herself against the wall and noticed a shelf in the corner. On it were labeled boxes, each marked with names and years. One where them read, Lucy 2016. Inside were school assignments, a library card, and a photo Claire had never seen before. Lucy, at what appeared to be age 10, older than she had ever been in public. The image was grainy, printed on cheap paper, but it was undeniably her daughter, her face more mature, her eyes hollow and distant. Claire fell to her knees, sobbing silently into her coat sleeve. Lucy was alive, or had been, and this room, this place, wasn't just a holding cell, it was a gallery. A collection she had to get out. Claire didn't remember how she got back to her car. Her hands were still trembling as she dialed 911, her voice catching as she struggled to explain where she was, what she had found, what she feared. Within the hour, 2 unmarked patrol cars and a forensics van rolled down the dirt path to the decrepit house, headlights cutting through the rising fog. Claire stood aside as uniformed officers and plainclothes detectives cordoned off the perimeter, moving with the steady precision of men and women trained for scenes exactly like this, but who likely hoped never to face them in real life. Detective Sloan, who had once briefly worked Lucy's case years ago before being reassigned, now returned to Claire's side, his face lined with disbelief. "You're sure this room was locked?" he asked, eyeing the green door. Claire nodded. "Padlocked. I broke it open." Inside, the room looked exactly as she'd left it, chilled, dim, and unbearably still. The insulation panels muffled sound so completely that even the footsteps of the officers were dulled. The drawings still lined the walls, the photographs still pinned on the corkboard. The box marked Lucy 2016 sat untouched on the shelf. Forensics moved in, snapping photos, taking swabs, measuring dust patterns, searching for DNA, for hair strands, for anything that could prove who had been inside. But Lucy wasn't there. There was no sign of recent human presence beyond Claire's own cache mattress. Faded plush toys sat in a neat row along one wall. An elephant missing an ear, a fox with a torn tail, a stuffed astronaut similar to the one Lucy used to sleep with. Next to the mattress was a small plastic table and chair sized for a young child. On the table sat a worn coloring book and a broken crayon. No blood. No sign of a struggle. Just the unbearable silence of somewhere that had once held a child for far too long. Sloane ordered the entire house searched. Cadaver dogs sniffed every room, the crawler-space, the small attic. Nothing. No remains, no fingerprints beyond the ones being cataloged. Whoever had used the room had cleaned meticulously, though inconsistently. Enough dust had gathered to suggest disuse in the last several months, but not enough to indicate it had been abandoned for years. Claire hovered just outside the green door, her eyes drifting from the drawings to the shelf. Something about the box labeled Lucy gnawed at her. She stepped inside and knelt in front of it again, ignoring the warnings from the techs about contaminating evidence. She lifted the papers gently, school assignments she recognized, a certificate for Best Imagination signed by Ms. Harmon, and, near the bottom, a thinner box inside the box, wooden and painted with faded stars. She opened it slowly. Inside was a stack of lined notebook paper held together by a rubber band. Each page was written in jagged, unsteady handwriting. Claire's breath caught as she read the first words. "If you found this, it means I'm not here anymore." The handwriting was undeniably a child's. The entries were dated, though not consistently, and each began with a different name. Celia, age 7. She cried every night, but said her mom could hear her dreams. Max, age 6. He hated the dark and always slept with the fox toy. Leela, age 9. She said she used to live by the lake. She drew her house for me. Claire flipped through page after page, stunned. Each entry described a different child, how they arrived, how they behaved, what they missed. Some pages were tear-stained, others included drawings of trees, stars, the green door. The last entries were written shakily, as if the writer's hands had grown weaker. And then she found it. Her name, Lucy, age 10. "I'm still here, but not for long. I think I'm next to go." Claire's vision blurred. The page continued. "Sometimes I hear footsteps and the door opens. Sometimes someone brings food. Sometimes they ask us questions. But then they stop, and we don't see that kid again." Below that, another line, "If my mom finds this, I love you. Don't forget me." Claire couldn't hold back the sob that escaped her lip. She pressed the paper to her chest, as if by holding it tightly enough, she could pull Lucy back from wherever she had gone. Sloane read the journal cover to cover. His face changed with each page, his professionalism cracking. He gave orders for the document to be copied immediately, and then contacted the FBI. This wasn't just about Lucy anymore. This was a pattern. A system that had operated in the shadows for decades. The officers returned with the names of the other children from the counties and different years. Others were untraceable. Some matched children thought to have drowned, run away, or disappeared during custody disputes. Claire sat alone in the squad car, gripping the journal like a lifeline. She refused medical attention, refused to leave. She only asked one thing. Did she write anything else? Anything recent? Sloane returned to the box, flipping the pages again, more desperately now. Near the back, folded into the journal, was a scrap of paper torn from a different notebook. It had only one sentence. The green door wasn't the only one. Claire didn't blink. She stared ahead, her voice flat. "Then there's another room," Sloane nodded slowly, then radioed for more units. Somewhere nearby, another door waited. Another room. Another answer. The discovery of the journal in the green room, and the haunting final note. The green door wasn't the only one. The investigation shifted into high alert. The FBI formed a joint task force with local authorities, bringing in behavioral analysts, forensic linguists, and child exploitation specialists. The journal pages were scanned, cataloged, and digitally enhanced to extract every smudge, every fading word. What emerged from those pages was no longer just Lucy's tragedy. It was a multi-decade pattern of disappearances previously thought to be isolated, unconnected, or simply tragic accidents. Analysts began comparing the names and ages of the children mentioned in the journal with children between the ages of 5 and 10, all children between the ages of 5 and 10. All vanished between 1995 and 2018. And one more horrifying detail emerged. Every one of them had last been seen at or near a bus stop on the same district route that serviced Maplecrest and surrounding rural neighborhoods. Detective Sloan stood in front of a large corkboard, red strings connecting dots on a regional map, each tack a heartbreak. "They were all on Route 41, he said grimly. "Every last one of them." Claire stared at the map, her eyes trailing from Lucy's point to the others, tracing the invisible thread that had bound their disappearances together all along. She remembered something Lucy had said once, something odd she'd told her after school one day. "Bus feels longer than the others, like there's more of it in the back, but nobody ever sits there." At the time, Claire thought it was a child's imaginative metaphor. Now it haunted her. The task force reviewed every transportation record from the last 30 years. Bus drivers, substitute drivers, maintenance staff, anyone who might have had access to the fleet. But the names were inconsistent. Files were missing or incomplete. One driver had used an alias. Another had passed away 2 years ago in an accident that suddenly seemed worth re-examining. The school district claimed its logs were purged every 5 years. The trail was stale, fragmented, until an unexpected call came in from a man named Albert Finch. Albert was a retired postal worker who had delivered mail to the outskirts of Maplecrest for nearly 30 years. Now, in his 70s, he had seen the news about the green room and the missing children and called with something he thought might be nothing but strange enough to mention. Sloan and another agent met him at his modest home just outside town. Albert served them tea and, without needing much prompting, began to speak. "Every Friday around 3:30 for a few years, I'd see a yellow school bus going into the woods behind the old timber road. But it didn't have the district number on the back, and I know the route. They never run that far west. I even asked one of the drivers once. She said no bus should be out there. When asked why he never reported it, Albert looked down at his trembling hands. I didn't think much of it. Figured maybe it was a church program or some kind of private transport, but it never had kids in it when it went in, just the driver, and sometimes when it came back out, it was dusk, and the windows were fogged." Sloan and the agent exchanged a look. "How long ago was this, Mr. Finch?" He blinked. "Started in 89, kept seeing it every Friday until maybe 2016. After that, nothing." When they showed Albert a photo of Lucy and the route she would have taken, he nodded solemnly. "Yeah, her stop was not far from where I'd see the bus turn." The team launched a drone survey of the forested area Albert had described. It was county land, technically unzoned and largely forgotten. On satellite images it appeared unremarkable: dense trees, overgrowth, no structures visible. But when the drone scanned thermal signatures and topography, a faint grid pattern emerged under the canopy. Symmetrical, unnatural. Aerial teams confirmed it, an old clearing with a Trek-Taylor foundation. By dawn the next day, search teams moved in on foot, cutting through brambles and brush. They found a hidden access road, barely visible, leading to what appeared to be a buried garage or vehicle bay, now caved in and flooded. And beside it, covered in vines and roots, was a rusting yellow bus. Its paint had faded to a sickly gold. The windows were shattered or missing, and moss clung to the roof like mold. But the inside told a different story. Metal clamps were bolted under several seats. The floor was lined with reinforced padding, now ripped and weathered. Faint traces of child handprints smeared the back windows, some visible only under UV light. The number on the side of the bus had been partially scratched off, but a forensic specialist retrieved enough digits to match it with a decommissioned vehicle supposedly scrapped by the school district in 2008. Records showed the bus was officially destroyed, yet here it was, forgotten, hidden, repurposed. Claire stood at the edge of the forest as officers hauled out evidence bags, stuffed animals, a torn backpack, a child's shoe. She didn't speak. She just stared into the trees, her jaw clenched, her mind racing with every name in the journal, every cry between the lines. Inside the bus's glove compartment, a map was found, crudely marked with red X's. One of the X's matched the location of the green room house. Another was deeper in the woods, past the buried garage. Claire saw it and felt something shift inside her. She pointed. She said to Sloan, "That's the next door." The red X on the forest map, the one deeper in than the others, wasn't listed on any official land survey. Sloane arranged for satellite support and ground reconnaissance, but Claire didn't wait. She never did. With a printed copy of the marked map in her hand and an old compass around her neck, she ventured out at dawn. The forest was thick, tangled with dead vines and rain-soaked earth, the kind that swallowed boots and sounded sound. Her breath fogged in the cold morning air as she pushed through brush, tracing the crude path from the original bus clearing toward the X. After an hour of walking, she found it. Not a structure exactly, but a clearing half hidden behind a fallen tree line. At first glance, it looked like an overgrown kennel or a collapsed animal shelter. Rusty fencing surrounded a sunken concrete slab. In one corner, what appeared to be a doghouse sat crooked, patched with warped plywood and overgrown with moss. A chain still hung from the side, as if meant to restrain a guard dog. But there were no animals here. Claire crouched beside it and pulled at the rusted handle of the doghouse door. It didn't budge. She grabbed a nearby stick and wedged it into the crack, forcing it upward with a grunt. The entire roof lifted, revealing not a hollow space, but a narrow staircase descending into the earth. The air that wafted up was cold, metallic, and old, like a forgotten basement left to rot. She called Sloane immediately, whispering her location, and descended one trembling foot at a time. The staircase was claustrophobic, barely wide enough for her shoulder. Water dripped from the walls, echoing with every step. At the bottom, the stairs opened into a room just like the green one, but larger, colder, and unmistakably more sinister. The walls here weren't lined with insulation. They were concrete, carved with strange symbols, tally marks, and what looked like crude drawings of eyes. A single light bulb flickered above, powered by a wire that snaked out of view. The floor was bare except for a stained mattress and a few discarded food containers. On the far wall, a mirror was bolted, high enough that a child would have to stand on tiptoe to see their reflection. Below the mirror, words had been etched in what looked like fingernails. "She watches us when we sleep." Claire backed away, her hands shaking. Then she saw it, tucked in a metal box beneath the mattress. Another notebook, smaller, worn. She flipped it open. Room 2 was written on the cover. The entries inside were shorter, more frantic. "They don't talk to us here. We wait in silence. I think this one is the last." She couldn't read more. A low creak echoed up the stairs. Claire froze. Then Sloane's voice rang out. "It's okay, it's me." He descended quickly, followed by 2 agents. They swept the bunker, confirming there were no exits beyond the stairwell. No power source, no cameras, just that light bulb drawing electricity from God knows where. Sloane looked at the mirror, then the box, then at Claire. "We need to see the rest of the map," he said. Back at headquarters, they unfurled the entire map, found in the first bus's glove compartment, and cross-referenced it with updated satellite data. There were 7 red marks in total, spread in an arc across nearly 30 miles of forest and undeveloped land. 4 had already been identified: the green room house, the buried foundation, and now the underground kennel. 3 remained unvisited, unconfirmed, untouched. The FBI brought in engineers and structural experts, suggesting that each site had likely been constructed or retrofitted for long-term concealment. Claire sat in the corner, barely hearing the logistics. Her eyes never left the map. Her finger rested on the final X, one tucked furthest west, near an old quarry that had been closed for environmental violations in the early 2000s. That spot was different, circled twice in red, marked with a star. "Why that one?" she asked. No one had an answer. That night, Claire returned to the first bus site with a flashlight, retracing every inch of the interior. The vehicle groaned in the cold wind, its rusted frame shuddering like a breathing thing. She dug beneath the backbench seat, where years of dirt and grime had settled. Her fingers brushed something hard, another compartment. She pried it open, revealing a plastic sleeve. Inside was a hand-drawn map, rougher than the others. It showed the same 7 marks, but now with labels. 1, drop room; 2, silence room; 3, observation; 4, transport; 5, holding; 6, transfer; and the final starred location, 7, end. Claire's throat tightened. This wasn't just a pattern, it was a system, an operation, and somewhere in that sequence Lucy had moved. The others had moved. The others had moved. The question wasn't just where was she now, but who had been moving them all this time. The quarry road was barely a road at all, more a trail of compressed dirt and gravel winding through dense underbrush, long forgotten by local maps and GPS systems. The FBI agents moved in teams, some on foot, others with thermal imaging drones, and Claire followed behind, her hands wrapped tightly around the updated hand-drawn map, marked with the red star and the haunting word end. Unlike the other sites, this place had no remnants above ground, no structures, no sheds, but the terrain matched the diagram, and when the agents tapped the earth with ground-penetrating radio, they found an echoing cavity beneath the surface. Digging took hours, careful work with portable equipment to avoid collapsing any hidden chambers. Then, just before dusk, a steel hatch was unearthed beneath a false layer of rock and clay. The hatch had no visible handle, recessed deep into the metal. It was old industrial, not something easily moved or noticed. Two agents pried it open with crowbars, the screech of rusted hinges cutting through the forest silence like a scream. What lay beneath was a ladder descending into total darkness, the air stale and heavy with decades of isolation. Claire insisted on going down first. The ladder creaked beneath her weight, the metal sticky with damp. She counted 27 lungs before her feet touched concrete. The flashlight beam cut through the black, revealing a narrow hall tiled with beige linoleum, cracked and yellowed. The walls were covered in childlike murals, clouds, suns, stick figures holding balloons. She took a few steps forward, her breath catching. There were rooms on both sides of the corridor, doors open, each space identical in structure and eerie familiarity. Inside were small cots with thin mattresses, cubby shelves filled with old toys, neatly arranged as if waiting for children to return at any moment. Stuffed animals lined the beds. Plastic bins held coloring books and crayons, puzzles, blocks. Some rooms had posters taped to the walls, faded images of cartoon animals and alphabet letters. At first glance, it looked like a makeshift daycare, a subterranean kindergarten. But everything was wrong. Too quiet, too still, too untouched, as if this place had been abandoned in a single instant, frozen in time by fear. She moved through the rooms slowly, her flashlight catching dust motes suspended in the air like snow. In one room, a bowl of dry cereal still sat on a tray, petrified with age. In another, a pair of tiny shoes had been left by the bed, neatly placed side by side. Claire felt her knees weaken, nausea rising. This wasn't just a bunker. It had been lived in, used. These weren't holding cells or torture rooms. This was a controlled environment, structured, intentional, designed to simulate normalcy, designed to hold children. The agents behind her spread out, photographing everything, labeling, recording. One of them pulled her aside. "Ma'am, you might want to see this." He led her to the largest room at the far end of the corridor. Unlike the others, this one had a central table, surrounded by small plastic chairs in faded primary colors. On the table were several open notebooks, drawings, and a small TV with a built-in VCR. A stack of tapes sat beside it, each labeled with a child's name and a number. Claire's eyes moved to the corner of the room, where something glinted in the flashlight's beam. It was a music box. Her breath caught. It was ceramic, shaped like a crescent moon, hand-painted with tiny gold stars. She recognized it instantly. Claire stepped forward and picked it up, her hands trembling. The latch was rusted, but she forced it open. The mechanism inside stuttered, then began to play. The tune was delicate, slow, fractured by years of stillness, but unmistakable. "You are my star. You shine so bright. I see you dancing in the night." Claire's knees buckled. It was a lullaby she had written herself, one she sang to Lucy since she was a baby, a melody passed down from her own mother, never recorded, never shared. The box had been handcrafted by Daniel for Lucy's second birthday. Only 3 existed, one kept in their home, one left at Claire's mother's house, and this one, stolen. She was here, she whispered. She was really here. Behind her, agents unearthed more evidence, hidden compartments in the walls containing food supplies, canned goods labeled in different languages, boxes of clothes, and old paperwork. The documents referenced serial numbers, logs, coded initials, rotation dates. It was an operation, a systemized method for moving and housing children. Claire stared at the lullaby box, the notes still echoing faintly in the sterile air. Lucy had played this, maybe days ago, maybe years. But she had been in this room, under this earth, waiting. Surviving. Sloane arrived moments later, pale and breathless, having descended the ladder himself. He scanned the room and locked eyes with Claire, who held out the box silently. He took it, recognizing the tune almost instantly. "We've got enough to expose this, to take it national," he said. "But we need to find out where the others lead. These rooms, they're part of something bigger." Claire didn't respond. She stood and turned back toward the hall. Her eyes followed the cracked tiles like a trail. "There's another path," she said quietly. "There has to be." She moved toward the back wall, where a supply closet door sat ajar. The hinges creaked as she opened it fully, revealing another ladder, this one leading downward into blackness. The air colder than before. The music box, still in Sloane's hands, played the final note and fell silent. The secondary ladder led deeper underground, twisting into a narrower shaft lined with rusted piping and old conduit that hadn't carried power in decades. Claire descended behind two agents, her flashlight beam bouncing off the damp walls. This was no longer just a shelter. It felt like a clergy's furnaces, much larger, something ancient, repurposed into a clandestine labyrinth for purposes no human heart should justify. At the bottom, they found a locked gate made of thick iron bars. Behind it was a utility corridor and an old maintenance room filled with broken electrical panels, empty tool racks, and rotting cardboard boxes. But more telling was the desk at the far end, a makeshift workstation with a cracked laptop, stacks of lined notebooks, and a child photographs dating back decades. On one sheet a list of names appeared, some crossed out, others circled. Lucy's name was not among them, but Claire recognized others from the journal. A sticky note on the desk read simply, "Still out there." Parents processed the room while Claire opened one of the notebooks. This one was different from the children's journals. The handwriting was adult, neat, methodical. Each page documented routines, pickup times, behavioral observations, adjustments to rotation sequence. She turned to a page dated 3 months before Lucy disappeared. Thursday. Successful redirect. Subject responded stable. The initials punched her in the stomach. L.B. Lucy Brennan. Sloane reviewed the materials and made a call to the database team. Within hours, the handwriting was matched to a man named Walter Cray, age 61, employed for over 30 years as a contracted maintenance technician for the Maple Crest Unified School District. His specialty was fleet repair and security installations. Claire didn't remember him, but that was the point. Walter Cray had operated quietly, invisibly, maintaining cameras, wiring locks, installing GPS systems, never teaching, never speaking with children, never noticed. He had clearance to access every bus yard, every surveillance panel, every camera, every system built to keep children safe. He had retired quietly 4 years ago, still living within the district, and noticed and unbothered. An arrest warrant was issued immediately, and agents converged on his rural home 2 towns over. The property was isolated, ringed by trees and hand-built fences. Cray didn't resist. He opened the door calmly, hands visible, a faint smile on his face. His living room was bare but clean, the walls covered in maps, lists, and small glass boxes containing labeled memorabilia, lunchboxes containing labeled memorabilia. He spoke without hesitation, without fear. "You found my sanctuaries," he said. "I wondered how long it would take." Claire watched from a distance as he was escorted into a cruiser, his expression unreadable. At headquarters, the interrogation began. Sloane asked the first question, "Why?" Cray leaned forward, folding his hands like a man offering a lecture. "Because they needed saving. The world outside, it's broken. Parents who ignore them, teachers who fail them, systems that chew them up. I created places where they could grow quietly, free from trauma." Sloane leaned in. "You took them." Cray nodded. "I redirected them. The buses, they weren't safe. The roads weren't safe. But with me, they had stability. They had structure." Claire, watching from the adjacent room through a one-way mirror, trembled. He spoke with such certainty, such calm delusion, as if what he'd done was logical, even benevolent. She wanted to scream. Then Cray turned his gaze toward the mirror, as if sensing her. "Lucy's mother is here, isn't she?" Sloane didn't respond, but Cray smiled anyway. She was special, so observant she drew constellations on her cot wall, told stories to the others. She didn't cry, not once. Cray's expression faltered for the first time. She's not with me anymore. She moved on. She grew too curious, started asking questions the others were too scared to ask. So? She was relocated? Sloane's voice sharpened. By who? Cray hesitated. I didn't operate alone. I never did. There are others. We rotated. We moved them to ensure security. I didn't make the system. I just maintained it. The room silent. Claire stepped back, her vision narrowing. Others, she whispered. In the journals recovered from the underground rooms, one final entry, written in Lucy's hand, stood out. They say I'll leave tomorrow. The man with the gloves said I'm strong enough now. I don't want to go. I want to go home. Claire traced the words with her fingertips. Her daughter had been prepared for something taken from one stage of this so-called sanctuary to another. But where? Sloane interrogated Cray for hours, trying to extract names, locations, anything, but the man remained vague, cryptic. You can't stop it. We've built a better future, away from this noise. Some children weren't ready, but some became extraordinary. It wasn't madness in his voice, it was faith. A chilling, unshakable conviction that what he had done was righteous. For nearly a year after Walter Cray's arrest, the investigation into the underground network of hidden rooms and vanished children dominated national headlines. Yet definitive answers remained elusive. Cray refused to give names, claiming he only ever met handlers once and never saw where the children went after relocation. Authorities scoured every inch of the maps and journals, raided storage facilities in 3 states, and followed hundreds of leads. But none brought them closer to Lucy. Claire became a consultant on the case, speaking at missing persons conferences and schools, always hoping someone somewhere would recognize her daughter's face. Her nights were filled with dreams, sometimes vivid, sometimes silent shadows, but always with Lucy just out of reach. Seasons changed. The 10th anniversary of Lucy's disappearance came and went. Claire had aged, her hair now streaked with silver, her eyes sharper, harder, yet never without that glint of unrelenting hope. She carried Lucy's music box with her everywhere. 9 years, 6 months, and 12 days after Lucy vanished, a clinic nurse in New Mexico entered a new patient's details into a digital record. The girl was 16, quiet, nervous, accompanied by a foster guardian who barely made eye contact. Her name was listed as Lucy Brennan. The nurse paused, thinking the name familiar, then quickly searched the missing persons database. The photo was old, but the eyes were the same. She flagged the visit and alerted her supervisor, who contacted the FBI through a national task force alert system. Within hours, the girl was brought into protective custody, gently questioned, slowly reassured. When asked where she came from, Lucy's answers were fragmented. I lived in a house underground, she said. Then I lived in a white place with other girls. She didn't know what year it was. She flinched at the sight of cameras and couldn't recall her last name unless prompted. But when they played a recording of the music box tune, she froze. Her eyes welled up. That's from the stars, she whispered. My mom used to sing that. She said it was just for me. Claire was on a flight the next morning, escorted by agents and driven to a protected center in Albuquerque. She stood in the doorway of a softly lit interview room as the girl sat inside, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes wide, uncertain. Claire stepped forward slowly, tears already streaking her cheeks. Lucy, she said, her voice barely a breath. The girl looked up. There was a pause, an aching, terrifying pause, and then her eyes widened. Mom? Her voice cracked, fragile like old paper. Claire dropped to her knees, arms open, and Lucy ran into them. The embrace was long, shaking, silent. Neither of them needed words. The world blurred around them. Nothing else mattered. The reunion made national news within hours, and while the media wanted exclusive interviews and photos, Claire refused them all. She wanted time to rebuild, time to reintroduce, time to understand the version of her daughter who had returned. Doctors confirmed Lucy suffered from complex trauma and memory fragmentation, likely induced by years of emotional conditioning and isolation. Some memories came back in fragments: the green door, the box of stars, a boy named Max who used to tell jokes. the woman with gloves who braided her hair every Sunday. She remembered hiding drawings under her mattress and whispering stories to the walls so they wouldn't forget her voice. But she also remembered Claire, her scent, the lullabies, the way her hand felt when they crossed the street together. "I used to try to dream of you," she told her mother one night, curled beside her in their temporary apartment. "But sometimes I couldn't remember your face, so I drew it every day until it felt real again." Claire enrolled her in a specialized trauma recovery program with gentle reintegration into schooling, therapy, art, and social contact. She never pushed for answers Lucy didn't want to give. She let the silence exist where words still couldn't reach. Some days were harder than others, refused to ride in buses, sometimes stared at green-painted doors for hours. But other days they laughed. They made pancakes, they looked at stars together. Claire hung Lucy's old drawings along their living room walls, and they began to create new ones, this time with houses above ground and skies filled with light. Months passed. The investigation into the remaining red X's continued, but for Claire, closure had already taken shape, not in the justice system, not in arrests or headlines, but in the sound of Lucy's voice calling her mom again, in the way she traced her fingers along the edge of the music box before falling asleep, in the way her daughter slowly, surely, came back to life. And for Lucy, though pieces of her past would always remain locked away in shadowed corridors, she no longer lived in fear of the dark. She had come through it. She had found the light, and in that light, she found her way home. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping narratives based on mysterious true events. What part of Lucy's journey shocked you the most? Do you think justice was truly served? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Oh, and tell us where you're watching from too. We'd love to hear from you.